There comes a moment in a woman's life when she stops asking for permission. Not because she has become cold, not because she no longer cares, and not because she has decided she is better than anyone around her. Something much quieter has happened. She has stopped abandoning herself. She no longer needs everyone to understand her choices before she makes them. She no longer explains every boundary until it sounds acceptable to the person who wanted to cross it. She no longer confuses being needed with being loved. And perhaps most importantly, she no longer hands other people the authority to decide who she is. This is what the modern world might call queen energy. Carl Jung never actually used that phrase, nor did he create a formal psychological category called the queen archetype, but within his writings on alchemy, the feminine psyche, the mother archetype, the anima, and individuation, the image of the queen appears as a powerful symbol. And what she represents is far more profound than confidence. Because the queen is not simply a woman who knows her worth. She's a woman who has learned to govern herself. In Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung explored the alchemical images of the king and queen, the Rex and Regina, and wrote, "The queen corresponds to the soul, anima, and the king to spirit." For Jung, these royal figures were symbols arising from the deeper unconscious. The queen could represent soul, feeling, intuition, relatedness, wisdom, the mysterious inner world that cannot always be explained logically, but nevertheless knows. And this changes the meaning of queen energy completely. It isn't about convincing yourself that you are superior. It isn't about making people chase you. It isn't about becoming emotionally unavailable so someone becomes obsessed with you. That isn't sovereignty, because you're still organizing your identity around other people. The queen asks a different question. Who governs your inner kingdom? Is it you, or is it your fear of rejection, your need for approval, your family, your wounds, your romantic relationships, your need to be chosen, because you can look powerful on the outside and still be governed by everyone except yourself? Before many women become sovereign, they become something else first. The agreeable woman, the accommodating woman, the woman who senses everyone else's emotions before she checks her own. She learns to read the room. Keep the peace. Be useful. Be understanding. Don't ask for too much. Don't disappoint anyone. Eventually, she becomes extraordinarily skilled at managing everyone else's kingdom while neglecting her own. She knows what everyone needs from her, but ask her what she wants. Sometimes she doesn't know. This is where Jung's concept of the persona becomes important. The persona is the social face we develop to function in the world. The problem begins when we mistake the mask for the whole self. A woman may become so identified with being good, pleasant, selfless, helpful, and easygoing that everything contradicting that identity gets pushed underground. Her anger, her ambition, her sexuality, her discernment, her hunger, her voice, her ability to say no. And what Jung understood was that what we reject from consciousness does not simply disappear. It becomes shadow. This is why stepping into queen energy often doesn't begin with a crown. It begins with confrontation. This is also where the modern idea of the dark feminine becomes interesting. Psychologically, a woman cannot become whole by pretending one half doesn't exist. For the woman who has spent years being agreeable, discovering her anger can feel like discovering fire. Saying no feels powerful. Withdrawing her attention feels liberating. No longer chasing feels like freedom. But here is where something important happens. Dark feminine energy may help a woman reclaim what she suppressed. Queen energy teaches her how to govern what she reclaimed. Because anger is powerful, but anger cannot be queen. Desire is powerful, but desire cannot be queen. Independence is powerful, but even independence becomes destructive when it turns into isolation. The queen doesn't destroy these forces. She gives them their rightful place. Her anger becomes discernment. Her desire becomes direction. Her independence becomes sovereignty. Her sexuality belongs to her rather than becoming a tool for validation. Her boundaries protect rather than punish. This is the difference between possessing power and being possessed by it. And every archetypal image has a shadow. Put a crown on an unexamined wound and you don't necessarily create a queen. Sometimes you create a tyrant. The Shadow Queen says, "If you disagree with me, you're beneath me." The Integrated Queen says, "You're allowed to disagree with me, and I'm still allowed to choose my path." The Shadow Queen says, "I don't need anybody." The Integrated Queen says, "I can love you without abandoning myself." The Shadow Queen uses silence to punish. The Integrated Queen knows when silence is wiser than endless explanation. And perhaps the most dangerous Shadow Queen is the woman who has confused emotional armor with strength. She has been hurt, so she becomes unavailable. She has been betrayed, so she becomes unreachable. She has been controlled, so now she must control. She tells herself, "No one will ever have power over me again." It sounds like sovereignty, but the old wound may still be ruling the kingdom. The queen's strength is different. She does not need to build a fortress around herself because she trusts herself to decide who enters. A wall says, "Nobody gets in." A boundary says, "I decide who does." That difference is everything. One of the clearest signs that a woman is stepping into queen energy is that she stops auditioning for places she already knows she doesn't belong. She doesn't beg someone to recognize her value. She doesn't keep presenting evidence of her goodness to someone committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't perform emotional labor, indefinitely hoping someone will eventually reciprocate. She doesn't shrink herself so insecure people can remain comfortable. But she doesn't need revenge either. Because revenge still binds you psychologically to the person you claim to have transcended. If your transformation requires them to regret losing you, you're still waiting for their validation. If your glow-up exists so somebody else will suffer, they are still governing part of your life. The queen doesn't need the old kingdom to collapse. She simply stops living there, and that is a much deeper form of power. There is another side of queen energy that social media rarely discusses. Stewardship. A mature queen does not exist only for herself. She protects what deserves protection, nurtures what deserves nurturing, and invests her energy deliberately. But she understands something the people-pleasing woman does not. Caring for someone does not require carrying everything for them. She can support without rescuing. She can listen without absorbing. She can love without managing another adult's emotions. She can be compassionate without becoming endlessly available. She can say, "I understand that you are disappointed," without immediately betraying herself to make the other person feel better. That is emotional sovereignty. And when people have benefited from your lack of boundaries, your boundaries may feel like cruelty to them. But discomfort is not always evidence that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort is simply what happens when an old psychological arrangement stops working. Perhaps one of the deepest transformations occurs when the queen stops organizing her life around being chosen. Chosen by a man, chosen by friends, chosen by family, chosen by society, chosen by the room. She begins choosing, consciously. She chooses what deserves access to her time. She chooses which relationships deserve investment. She chooses what she will tolerate. She chooses what she will create. She chooses what version of herself she is willing to leave behind. This is deeply connected to Jung's idea of individuation, the lifelong movement toward becoming the person you actually are rather than simply the person you are conditioned to be. And individuation requires psychological separation, the ability to say, "That is what you want for me, but what do I want? That is what my family believes, but what do I believe? That is who I had to become to survive, but who am I now?" This may be the most important thing to understand about Queen Energy. The crown isn't a reward for finally realizing you're special. The crown is responsibility. Responsibility for your choices, your boundaries, your healing, your patterns, your desires, your shadow, your future. The immature psyche says, "Look what they did to me." The queen eventually asks, "What am I going to do with what happened to me?" That doesn't excuse harm. It doesn't erase injustice. It simply returns authority to the one place where she actually has it, herself. And strangely enough, this often makes her softer rather than harder. Because when you trust yourself, you don't need to control everyone else. When you respect yourself, you don't need everyone else to admire you. When you know you can leave what dishonors you, you don't have to live constantly afraid of betrayal. When you know you can say no, your yes becomes genuine. When you stop abandoning yourself, love stops feeling like captivity. Through a Jungian lens, the deepest meaning of the queen isn't status. It is integration. The queen has met the woman who wants approval, the woman who is angry, the woman who wants to be desired, the woman who wants revenge, the frightened girl, the caretaker, the rebel, the wounded woman. And rather than allowing any one of them to seize the throne, she listens to them, integrates them, and governs them. That is sovereignty, not perfection, not superiority, not emotional detachment, self-government. So perhaps a woman finally steps into her queen energy, not when other people begin treating her like royalty, but when she stops treating herself like someone whose life belongs to everyone else. She stops waiting to be chosen. She stops waiting for permission. She stops negotiating away her deepest knowing simply to preserve relationships that require her self-abandonment. And she realizes the crown was never something another person could place on her head, because the kingdom was never outside of her. It was the inner world she had been giving everyone else permission to rule. And the moment she takes responsibility for it, the queen has returned. So ask yourself, who is ruling your inner kingdom? Your wounds, your fear, your need to be loved, your need to be understood, or the woman you are finally becoming? Because stepping into your queen energy doesn't mean believing you're above anyone else. It means finally accepting responsibility for the one life you were always meant to govern. Your own. If this found you at the right time, I'd genuinely love to hear from you in the comments. Until next time, keep walking your sovereign path.